over to so now Whitaker.
Well, Terry's take 113. Hope you enjoy it.
I'm going off. Like, I call Brown Racing. Don't know who next. Oh, you and Eddie want to go? On the same night. Welcome back to number one podcast in the sport where someone finally pulled the trigger on Richie Woodall and put us out of our misery. And I don't say joy, but it was frustrating to watch Richie Woodall a lot of times. Sometimes you're looking at him and go, hold on, you're the guy that's a G, former world champion, you're an Olympian yourself. Why does it always feel that everyone's watching a different fight to you? Like, because for Richie, every fight fits a certain model, right? Short to mid-range, holding his feet, two-phase attack, right? So many times you can say that. I think Richie has a tremendous amount of boxing knowledge, but how do you put it? Sometimes that knowledge doesn't get translated into what's valuable to the fans. And I've learned this the hard way when it comes to commentating. Like, you have the urge to show off what you know, but what people really want to see is the entertainment side of things. That's what they want to see. So I think Richie's paid a heavy price for maybe not listening to feedback. And as a result, DAZN and Queensberry, we don't need two sets of commentators. We're going to stick to one. And it's kind of shit. It's mediocre. Now, who's in the lineup? Whoever the lady is, I have no idea. Is it Georgina Lally? Is it Anna Wall? I don't know who she is, right? Darren Barker. If ever someone else should have caught the bullet, it's Darren Barker. Like, terrible. Absolutely terrible. The fact that Mike Costello's got to go and sign on because of that guy is shocking. Barry Jones, I know the hardcores like him. I'm okay with him. I think he was better with guys like Dempsey, etc. I don't think that his own chemistry's worked for him. But maybe he's got an opportunity to shine. Tony Bellew, I know Bellew gets a hard time, but Bellew in a commentary booth is pretty good actually. I can't, and I want to, but I can't give Bellew a kicking over that. Now, Carl Frampton, deservedly so. I think Carl's been solid. I think he's a straight shooter, and he still says stuff that's interesting. Carl doesn't feel tired yet, which is impressive because it took us about 5 minutes to get bored of Adlay League. So credit to Carl Frampton. And then they've got Adlay on a depot. Whatever, but good luck to him. This is what you wanted, right? So good luck to him. You've got family to feed. I'm not gonna fight many bullets that way. He hasn't done me any wrong, and I think he's been fine as a broadcaster. My frustration is always kind of with how he was positioned before, but that's a long time ago, so part of that. And then the voice of UK boxing, Mr. Adam Smith, is back in a prominent role. 5 years after begging DAZN to take him, they have taken him. So it's solid, if unspectacular. It's a real shame that Stevie Bunce doesn't get a prominent mention there. I think Steve is kind of the glue that holds the grey hair brigade to the rest of boxing, and they're a very important part of it because they also help dictate the tone. And it's a real shame that he doesn't get a prominent profile. But hopefully they'll still use him. Hopefully they'll still use guys like David Hay. Clearly Forge didn't get an invite to the barbecue, which I'll be surprised after what he's done with his channel. But with his channel the way it is, does he really need the profile? But let's talk about the wider DAZN and Queensberry situation. And actually, the real risk that Queensberry shows are watched by like 10,000 people now, if that. And I think we're going to get to a point where Box Nation shows are doing bigger numbers than the Queensberry shows. People are showing no appetite to jump on DAZN, none. And as much as we can talk about the rehab season stuff and this, that, and the third, no one's really going to be involved in this. DAZN aren't pushing this the way it should be pushed. This is almost something where if you'd been Queensberry with the power they had, you would have tried to do a deal with like ITV or someone and say, look, there are certain shows we're going to put on DAZN and there are certain shows we're going to put on ITV, right? Because you're trying to grow stars. Like, what have we got on Saturday? We've got Joyce versus Philip Hergovich, right? If you've never seen boxing before and you see those two fight, you'll be happy with that, right? If that's on your TV, prime time, you'll be happy with that. You know, you get to watch that, you know, in between match of the day potentially. You get Jamie Shakiva versus David Adlay, two big guys who are, you know, going to go after each other. That's another thing you're going to be excited by. That's a good fight, and I don't think that really harms DAZN, nor does it really harm Queensberry to put that on something like an ITV. Even if you said, right, we'll show it 2 days later. But the more you put people on these niche channels because they offer more money, the less people are going to care. I know people say, oh, you can push it on social media. Yeah, you can, but that hasn't worked so far. Like, I would argue, if you look at Anthony Joshua paid a big penalty when he moved from Sky to DAZN in terms of visibility. Like, brands almost went like, well, we don't see him anymore. Because remember, the only times you ever really saw AJ were coming up to fight weeks or on his socials, right? And if you look at his socials, he's mostly just in Watford. And so it's not really great for advertisers. But when he was on Sky, it was because there was a machine behind him, and Under Armour loved all of that. On DAZN, there's no real machine behind him. And people have forgotten this. People have chased the money so much, and the greed in boxing has got to such a level that they've forgotten that you've got to build stars. And look, Alfie Warren doing fantastic stuff on Box Nation. I take my hat off to him. It's necessary, but that's almost like a level below the guys who need to be building. The guys who need to be building are guys like David Adlay, Jamie. I'd even say Denzel. Denzel should be a primetime TV star. Then you just shoot him onto whatever platform you want to go and fight for titles. This is how I would have structured it. And people say, oh, well, you won't make as much money. I'm like, in the short term, no. But in the long term, you will, because when this era of stars is done, you just kind of below the guys on DAZN that nobody knows. How does that make any sense? You know what I mean? You know, DAZN is not going to grow. It's not going to grow. This is potentially the worst economy in which to move to a new subscription channel. Forget the boxing for a second. Queensberry have caught themselves in the middle of a cost of living crisis where people are now saying, what is it I really need to watch? Right? And in priority order, it is Premier League football. Right? So the Sky subscription stays. Then you need something for the kids. So that's either Netflix or Disney, whatever, right? That will give you ESPN. So you're like, I kind of got some sport here. Then you don't need anything else. TNT, for what? Bit of rugby, bit of Champions League. But people don't really watch the Champions League like that anymore, right? I think that's what's happened because they took it off mainstream TV. You know, what else are you going to get on then? Maybe some skiing, some kabaddi, who knows, right? And then DAZN, you're going to get NASCAR, corfball, shuffleboard, fencing, for. So this is probably the wrong time to be on DAZN. I can see people just walking back from that going, I don't need this. Or just getting the set-top boxes, right? That's what people end up doing. So this is going to be a really interesting phase, and I can see some moves being made here where you're going to have consolidation. Now, I don't know if it's going to be DAZN and TNT through Discovery. I don't know if it's going to be DAZN and Sky through Comcast. But at some point, DAZN is going to find a home on one of these platforms because this isn't sustainable. You're looking at what's happening in the tariff world. And luckily, I think this has saved DAZN in a lot of ways as well, that these tariffs that Trump's imposed are only on physical goods and not services. So the digital economy is saved. Otherwise, that could have been an absolute disaster. But look out for how this plays out, because the economics of it may have made sense when the deal was signed. But if you look at current conditions where beginning of April, everyone's bills went up, your phone bill went up, your utilities went up, your council tax went up. If you got rent, it's probably gone up too. Do you know what I mean? So if you got business, your rates have got, everything's gone up. And this is where you're going to start making cutbacks. And I imagine DAZN will be one of those, because DAZN's valuable 3 times a year, for being honest. So what to make of the first Queensberry show on DAZN? It's a mixed bag. Look, Joyce versus Herovic is a reasonable heavyweight fight. Yes, it's not for any title, but if you're not going to have a title fight, 2 guys who have history from the amateurs jumping in the ring together, solid enough reason for them to get involved. In terms of Joe, you wonder what kind of condition Joe's in, bearing in mind that, look, this fight's not too far removed from Joseph Parker versus Bacoli, and whether Joe could have done that fight. And if he could have done that fight, then what condition is he in now? It's a question. I actually don't know the answer to that. But you also look at it from the perspective of Joe's done well historically against people who aren't as tall as him. Where he has a size advantage, Joe's generally done well. And when someone's got some size on him, it's been tricky. And obviously the Chisora fight is an anomaly in that. But that's kind of Joe, perhaps on the downswing, which is odd because Derek's older. So you wouldn't necessarily have thought that. I think there are 2 elements with Joe. Element number 1 is that Joe is getting old. Maybe we'll add a third one afterwards. Joe's getting old. And I can talk to that in terms of your body just doesn't respond quick enough. And you won't notice it. Like if you watch Joe in the gym or watch him sparring, you won't notice it. But he'll be noticing it because certain things will happen that didn't used to happen before. And he'll be like, I'm still doing my runs. I'm still doing my strength and conditioning. I'm still doing this. And shots that used to just miss are now just catching me. Or I used to be able to get my jab to him before he got his jab to me. I can't do that anymore. That's age. You can't reverse that. And that's why you notice older guys become more conservative in how they box and they just stick to the basics. I think age is catching up with Joe. And if he loses to Herovic, don't be surprised if that's his last fight. Just because it's like, well, I've taken this as far as I can. And I think deep down, Joe probably wants to go and do something else now. It's just that this is the thing that pays him the most. I'd say the second thing, in addition to age, is his style, right? His style is not suited to avoiding guys like Herovic who have pretty solid straight games, right? Philip Herovic is the one too solid enough, and Joe's head movement's almost non-existent now. We haven't really seen it since Mexican Joe, kind of Capoeira Joe. We haven't seen that kind of head movement. So if he can't get his head off the center, I think Herovic will just ping him. If Herovic has any confidence left, he'll ping him. And the third element is just psychology. Does Joe want to run people over anymore? This is a perfect fight for him because he's in the ring with another guy who's unsure of himself. And if Joe can just go right, juggernaut or bust, I think he could win. But if he tries to box his way in and try and think his way into this fight, I don't see it happening. I think he has to impose some physicality, some intensity, and he's got to just plan not to go the distance. I think it's 10 rounds. Doesn't want to go the distance. So that's probably the fight of interest in terms of Jamie TKV versus David Adlay. Here's what I'll tell you for certain. If they've got Jamie as the underdog and it's anything greater than 2-1, go and put some money on it. The bookies will have this one so far wrong. So far wrong. Because people fall in love with 2 things. 1, Adlay's power. 2, the fact that Adlay's in his corner. So they'll fall in love with. But these 2 guys know each other well. I've seen sparring clips. And when people say, oh, it's just 10 seconds of sparring, 5, 6 minutes worth of footage. To know that Jamie's not worried about what Adlay can bring. If Jamie can be super professional and locked in and be the best version of him, it's a hard night for David Adlay. But we don't know what the evolution is because I don't think they've sparred in the last couple of years. But when they did, the gap was the gap, right? and you've got Wardley in camp. So you're doing a lot of good work, and you're working with Wardley, and Wardley will be able to tell Jamie what it's like and that sort of thing. So I think there are a lot of advantages swing Jamie's way that the bookies haven't factored in. So that's a good outside bet. If you wanna make a few quid for the Easter break, look at Jamie to win about if Jamie's Jamie, he'll be in off the double jab, loads of hooks to the body, breaking David Adlay down. Stamina issues might creep in, and then the fight doesn't go the distance. That could happen, but Jamie has to be on it for that to happen. But that's where my head's taking me. But then we saw what David did to Solly Whitaker, so anything's possible. But I think after that first round, if Jamie survived by then, you will start to see the monster in him come out. And then the back of the card is kind of what I just call like the recycle stable, right? So the guys you just put on shows because it fills out the card. There's no like that's when you can go and make a cup of tea, right? If you go and do stuff, go and get your pizza, whatever it is, you can do that for the bulk of that card where you're like, God, these guys aren't going where we thought they would go, so you can miss those fights. And then there are a couple of interesting debuts. Are there debuts? We'll say they're debuts. Delicious Ori will be making his debut. So opponents don't really matter when you're making a debut. It'll be someone for him to look good against. Please don't give him Phil Williams, whatever you do, because that's not the one. Find him someone from Eastern Europe who's willing to fall over. And then I think Rampton Musa is going to be jumping in with Robbie Chapman, from what I'm hearing. I think that'll be a good fight for him. Robbie's a good guy to gauge someone's talent because, Robbie will take it for the right kind of walk for his debut. But they're interesting because they're two of the latest to come off that GB conveyor belt. So this is where we start to see is GB really producing for the sport or not? My opinion is it doesn't, and I've said this for a long time. And the core reasons for that are England boxing just want you to be bolt upright. Yeah, their whole thing is if we win the game, they don't coach stuff like intensity, and they don't things like control and psychology of fight. They don't teach what I call the art of boxing. Like they've gone down this kind of science route, like the kind of metrics based route, as opposed to the science. And what you're finding is that when our kids are going over to tournament X, tournament Y, tournament Z, they're beating the people they should be, and then when they're coming up against the kind of the top tier guys, it's not there. There's no intensity. There's no hunger. Like the things you really need. And I don't think you get those if you just have an EIS full of nice kids. You have to have someone who sets the tone, someone nasty that just sets the tone, like destruction. I think in every international team, you need a couple of knockout artists, people who just like taking heads off. And GB had that with Joshua for a long time, and that set the tone. And I think now it's gone down this kind of Soviet route, but if you just water down the Soviet system to the bare bones, mate, it's not good. And this is a worrying thing. So if you add in the fact that boxing is moving on to this huge paywall that no one cares about, we're not generating the talent in our international system to feed the pipeline. And then our domestic game is in crisis. Like, these are very dark times for boxing, and someone's got to do something somewhere. Someone in boxing with money has to put money back into this grassroots system at some point before it dries up completely. Can I just switch gears for a second? Because something's just come to me, and it's, I don't even know how to put it. It's one of those mad situations, isn't it? But, Scott Nicholson fought Tiara Brown a couple of Saturdays ago. Yeah, Tiara Brown won, and I'm happy for Tiara because, she's wanted that opportunity for a long time, and I think she was avoided by a lot of people. Although, interesting enough, she never called out Ellie Scotney. But, yeah, Tiara Brown wins. And, fair enough. I think Scott Nicholson, for all of her talent, was a bit one-dimensional, and it showed. But that one dimension had been pretty effective, and styles make fights. And I think Tiara Brown was able to bring some physicality to Sky that I don't think Sky dealt with before. And if you factor in the fact that I think they were roughly the same height as well, with Tiara having long arms, yeah, she had long arms, so that would have also complicated matters. So Tiara wins, and she's going on a victory tour, and I get it. You know, she's waiting a long time, and you know when you get into that position, you're like, if I were to ever be a world champion, I'm going to talk my talk, I'm going to have my moment, and you're going to hear me until I'm done talking. Now, yeah, fair enough, and I have no issue with that. Like she can poke the chest of absolutely anyone she wants to, but she did. She did a pod with Akim Barak, I think it's on the ATS network, and she said that she spoke to Sky Nicholson's coach, and I'm assuming that's Eddie Lamb because that's who we associate with Sky, right? And she's like, yeah, Sky Nicholson's coach said she was spoiled. And I heard that. And it never rang true. The reason it didn't ring true is Ed and I talk most weeks, whether it's messages or voice notes, or sometimes, you know, it'll be a quick call depending on time zones and stuff. But me and Ed will talk. I've got a lot of respect for Ed. Ed, if you're to rank people in boxing on integrity, Eddie Lamb's like number one. Or no, he's in that group at the top. There isn't anyone in boxing that's got a bad word to say about Eddie Lamb. He hasn't done anyone over. He stayed loyal when other people wouldn't have stayed loyal. He's old school in that sense, right? He's got those old school values. So Ed would never do that. Ed would never throw his fighter under the bus publicly, never. But the thing that made it feel a bit wrong to me was, I think all the time, there's never been a hint of Sky Nicholson being anything other than a model pro. You know when a coach says, she's like my family, that lets you know he thinks highly of it. So then to hear Tiara Brown say, yeah, I spoke to Sky Nicholson's coach and he said she was spoiled. You're like, what do you mean spoiled? You won, fair enough, but spoiled? Nah. If you want to allude to stuff about who she may or may not be sleeping with, do that, but don't drag someone's name into a situation when they're known for nothing but integrity. I thought that was in bad taste, and I think
I did as well.
the lesson for everyone in boxing. Tiara Brown is now going to find it really, really hard to find a fight because that 126 division is kind of dead without Sky Nicholson. It's dead without the Brits. So who's Tiara Brown going to fight? And this outburst here won't have sat well in the UK. And so she's isolated that market. So now you're hoping that Jake Paul signs you. And then who you really got left to fight? Whoever Jake's got in the stable. I think that was a really bad move. In her position, what I'd be doing is I'd start walking back a lot of the stuff she said because she's still got to do business. And if her management and promotional team haven't got behind her and said, look, just walk a lot of this stuff back, say you got high up the win and stuff because we're going to find it hard to do deals. Because two things will happen. They'll either just not work with Tiara Brown, and we've seen people get frozen out of boxing before, or the worst one is they'll just set her up. They'll just set her up to get plastered. Because you've seen Baumgarten's gone down to 130. It's not hard to convince Tiara Brown to go up to 130, and then all of a sudden you're dealing with someone who wants to take your head off. So hopefully she'll do the right thing and kind of either provide evidence, because you've got to give her the opportunity to state her case, provide the evidence, or walk it back. Because that's always in bad taste when you drag someone else's name into a situation that had nothing to do with it. What else has been happening? We've got to talk about Ben Whitaker. It's not a week in boxing without talking about Ben Whitaker versus Liam Cameron, is it? So they're now butting heads over what was in the contract. Is it a 10-rounder? Is it a 12-rounder? I'm hearing from I think I've heard from about 5 different people now that 12 rounds is in the contract, which is fair enough. Right? If Liam's aspiring to titles, the 12 rounds counts in his favor. If Ben Whitaker was to show that he is a guy that can win titles, he's got to start doing 12 rounds now. Now, if you look at what this fight really is, this is a quest for redemption for Ben Whitaker, right? This is him trying to get his image back to what it was. And this is the hardest way to do it, I'm not going to lie. This is the hardest way for a boxer to do it. To go against a guy that at various points in the previous fight was bullying you. And so you've got to turn that around because you can't just win on points. It can't just be jab and move. It has to be, I think there are a couple of things. You've got to show that you don't need anything stacked in your favor to win. Right, that's the first thing. So do the 12 rounds. The second thing is you got to show you got that dog. Because if you just jab and move, we already know that there'll be someone that can read that and deal with it, right? Because there are better guys than Liam Cameron in the division. And Liam's not really a light heavy either. So you've got to show that you're the dog. You've got to show that you're the dominant guy in there. You've got to show that you can impose yourself. Because if you can't do it at this level, where's the confidence? Because it won't get easier. Even if you do win, now look at who's in front of you. Dan Aziz, Joshua Boatsy, Craig Richards, Willie Hutchinson. Like, you could reel off names at 175 that can cause problems. Zach Chelly coming up to 175. There's so many names that can cause problems, and Zach's a rival. Generationally, Zach's a rival. So it's not going to get any easier for Ben if he wins. So there's no jabbing and moving. You've got to show you can dog it out, because you want people to be like, nah, I can't fight that guy. He's too much of hard work. And I'm not saying Ben can't do it. I think Ben can do it. Just like I think Liam can win as well. These two guys are in it together. Yeah. And we don't get enough of that in our sport. So let's celebrate that firstly. Secondly, and I think this is just as important, let's also acknowledge that we need to talk about the bridge in boxing. We need to find a way of bringing kids from the amateur system into the pros where they're not learning on the job. I don't know what that bridge is. I think I've talked about before the ending the distinction between amateur and pro gym. That's one of my big things. For a number of reasons. One, just cost pressures. That's the most important one. The second most important one is the sharing of knowledge. That way the knowledge can be retained and transferred. And third, I just think you'll get better coaching because it'll be easier to find the blaggers, number one. Number two, it'll also be easier for someone to own a fighter from cradle to grave if they're playing in the same gym. And I think those things are important. That in terms of helping, bridge that gap, because a number of times you've got to tell youngsters, look, if you're looking to turn pro, your style's all wrong. Your hips are too high. You're kind of boxing at the height of your height, at the top of your height, where you don't really want to. You want to kind of bring it down a bit, so your center of gravity is lower, and you can kind of manage those forces better. But I think these are all important things. And Ben's going through that process now of realizing what got him to that silver medal is probably holding him back in the pros. Right? You can do all the flashy stuff. Roy Jones did a lot of the flashy stuff, but you've got to do the dog stuff as well. And I believe he can do that. And hopefully we get to see that. Is that on DAZN or on Sky? I have no idea. But that's going to probably be the start point to an amazing few weeks in boxing when we go from Cameron versus Whitaker to Eubank Bend and then Canelo, and then it starts to pick up. Just going to wrap up because I'm absolutely sweltering in this recording. What's happening with Anthony Joshua? Hearn says he's injured, but anyone that's been following Joshua for the last 4 or 5 months, he's been using his hands for all sorts of stuff. Like, where's the injury? It's not like he's not playing football. It's not like he's not lifting weights. Like, what injury does Anthony Joshua have? And how did he get it? Because he didn't get it boxing. So how did he get it? Or they're still trying to cover up for the fact that mentally he's not right. Think about this. He's done no brand work. So he hasn't really been doing any brand work. He hasn't done any corporate business, none of that. He hasn't really been boxing. What has he been doing? I think it will come out at some point that Dubois knockout really affected AJ, and he didn't want to leave the house. He still doesn't want to leave the house. And that's why you're just seeing him keep his world really small right now and keep his circle super tight. And I'm not saying this, by the way, to revel in it. Like, this is the part in boxing where, as a community, we want to get around someone. Because, we talk about we want this guy to win or that guy to win or this guy to lose. But I don't want to see people struggling mentally in boxing. I don't care. Like, it could be my enemies. It could be a Danny Connor. It could be a Sonny Edwards. I don't want to see anybody struggle mentally. Because the stuff we have, it's just words. I know people don't want to hear this. It's just words. Because in the sport of boxing, everyone is handy enough that if they wanted to go and address a problem, they would do so. So a lot of it's just words going back and forth, to fill space, to entertain, whatever it is. And so when it comes to someone like Joshua, I really hope he can pull through because we're in April now. So he's not fighting before July because he's not in camp and he's not in shape. Well, let me rephrase it. He's in civilian shape, but he's not in Femi shape, if you see what I mean. So that's going to take at least 12 weeks, right? So we're looking at early July, the minimum before AJ could even think about fighting someone. Realistically, you're looking at August now. That's crazy. So he would have been out the ring nearly a year. That lets you know he's on the way out. Like, because remember, when he fought Jermaine Franklin, he was talking about I need to be active, I need to fight 3 times a year, I need to be more active. And now look, no activity, no training, no nothing. So if anyone knows anything in addition to that, let me know, because my understanding at the moment is he hasn't recovered mentally from what happened. He might be getting over it now, but there was a point where he didn't want to be seen by anybody because he knows what happens when people lose, because he has been part of that as well. You know, when he's seen people lose, he put a little cryptic message out or a little video of him smiling. It happens, right? That's the game, but it can happen to anyone. So, you know what? Good luck to it, but hopefully, then it's nothing too serious. I want to end this one with a bit of an old timer moment, like old time. And yesterday I was in the gym. Young kid were talking after the session, and he asked an interesting question. And he said to us, "What was the lodge like in your day?" Right, we obviously had to pick a time period, right? So we picked like 2006, like 2009. And we're talking about how scary the training was, how scary being in that environment was. And like in those days, you had guys like Smalls and Anthony Smalls. You had Leon Williams, like Big Dom Akinladi was there, Slum Big Linton was there, Danny Davis, Martin Welsh, Scott McDonald. Like there's like loads of really, really good names. Then you got the young boys coming through around that time, right? So that would have been the time where guys like Rick Slew were coming through. Andre Sterling was making his kind of way through. Big Chris Brown, Yilmaz, but Yilmaz had been there from a schoolboy. This is kind of like the era of Charlie Harrison starting to mature. So you had like this really deep talent roster, all held together by Mick Carney. And you know, you had your trainers there, Reigate, Adam Martin, etc. Like real names that people now know, right? But all in the same place at the same time. And like I'd jump in and out because I was always away with work. So I was never consistent enough to be in that squad. But Mick would say, look, if you want to pop down on Thursday for a little training session, feel free. But you'd train, right? And you'd always just be like, you'd be at work going, oh, it's gonna be horrible, it's gonna be horrible, it's gonna be horrible, it's gonna be horrible. It's weird. You never look forward to walking through those doors, but you were buzzing when you left. Because in between arriving and leaving, you went through hell. Like the goal of every training session was to drain everything out of you. You weren't supposed to be smiling, laughing, and joking. Like anyone that's been to the lodge, you'll know you've got like the wood floor, right? Beautiful wood floor. And it just used to be. So that's why you've got the little kind of squeezing thing at the lodge, because you had to wipe the floor because it became dangerous just because everyone sweated that hard, right? And there'd be days when it was just like a sauna in there. Maybe, I mean, you have to open the fire doors and stuff. And I was comparing it to what I saw when I was in there yesterday. I was like, it's completely different now. It's a nice place to train. Nice. Nice. It's all right. You know, do a bit of work. It's a little bit uncomfortable. But no one walks in scared. Everyone walks in happy. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Maybe it's just a different era. But I don't think it's a coincidence that you've got guys like me, Linton, Simon, Solid Williams, you know, I should say. Martin Welsh is still doing something. Danny Davis is still active. I'm sure David Pereira is doing something somewhere. Like you can list all the guys, Adam Martin, Eddie Lamb. All of us have that mindset of we need to find that dark place and inhabit it. Which I don't think youngsters do. So when you're watching why it feels like boxers are more willing to find a way out, taking you, all this sort of stuff. I think it's from that. Take it easy. Like if someone hit the canvas, they hit the canvas. they hit the canvas. There was no, that was the and if you didn't have that, you weren't allowed in. That was the culture. It was look, we need to show the public why you can't just come in and do the sport. This is the whole point of boxing. I can remember dudes coming in, James Cracknell coming in and just being like, yeah, he ain't built for it. And these kind of one or two charity shows, white collar guys would come in, get dropped with a body shot, get not head taken off because you don't want to take the mick, but you want to let people know you more than do this. Like you might just boom someone on the bicep. I mean, the bicep is tricep at the deltoid, then with their arms put a little shot in there, right? And you see the look in their eyes and they feel that force. And you know, can you go for it or not? All that sort of stuff. Jumping in, doing a few rounds with the old Bill. It was a scary, intimidating, foreboding place to be. But once you'd overcome that and finish the session, the happiest place you could be. We don't have enough of that anymore. I think it's still true up north. I think there's still some like, gnarly gyms up north. I remember I told you the story. Well, I used to go up to Camp Detox. Before I used to train at Alliance Elite, I used to train up at Camp Detox, which is like Danny Thornton's place. And you go in there, and it's got the outdoor jungle gym and all that stuff, which you actually see on, you can see that on the way in from Bradley. You ever get a train from Bradley, you can go past Camp Detox, and you put it into Leeds Station, it's normally on your, it should be on your left. And so I remember you go in there, and there's this gruff Yorkshire fella. You go uphill, a mile uphill, a mile downhill, that's your warm up. You come in, do your skipping, do your training, sparring, and you're sparring like tough northerners, scaffolders, bricklayers, bouncers, whatever it is. You know what I mean? And then you go to a nasty circuit at the end. And I was like, wow, it's still alive here. And it's no coincidence that the North tends to do better than the South, because I think the North is just stuck to what's always worked. And they've kept a lot of their old stages up there, whereas, I mean, we just get these personal trainers come in and they're talking about stuff like you need a deload week. And we're like, they're teenagers. What do you mean a deload week for? Deload for what? Why? Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, guys are talking about having programs for young kids. I'm like, these young kids need to lift heavy stuff and lift a lot of it. They're not going to break. They're not going to break. Let them work hard. And there's not enough of that down south, in my opinion. You don't work our boxers hard enough. I'm yet to be in an environment that feels scary to me. I mean, there hasn't been a scary environment in my eyes since Double Jab, where people would come in, oh yeah, I could do a couple of rounds, and they never came back. Just couldn't. Like, I don't think most, like, I think you could take the kids from GB now, and I'd run them through one of my sessions, they wouldn't cope. If you can cope with one of my sessions, you can go to GB and it's easy. That's why kids like Courtney found it easy at GB. Because we worked harder. It was about intensity. It was about really seeing what's the breaking point for your body and then adjusting training accordingly. But you'll be surprised at what you can do. And I wish more people were like that, not just in boxing, in life. Don't be afraid to be uncomfortable. Don't be afraid to be in that dark spot where you go, I can't see a way out of it. But you keep going. Keep going. Eventually that light shows up. And that's both the best and the worst feeling in the world. Because once you see the light, you're like, okay, I've only got so much to do before I'm done. That's also a horrible place. The best place to be when you're in those sorts of sessions is right in the middle, when you don't know how far in you are. And your body just makes peace with being uncomfortable. When you see the light at the end of the tunnel, you know there's comfort on the other side. And then it becomes worse because you've got a contrast. So that's just a quick tip for you there, yeah. Just, when you find yourself in the middle of a hole, stay there. It's so much fun. But back to what I was saying to this kid, I said to this kid, it's your duty to bring that back. Sparring shouldn't be friendly, especially like when you've got tournaments coming up. It shouldn't be friendly. Do you know what I mean? Like, people should be nervous to be in here. Like, if I'm not on my game, it's going to hurt me today. I don't think we've got enough of that, unfortunately. If you're feeling all middle-aged, I want to just tap out and say, whenever you listen to this, have a great weekend. And, you know, if you enjoy the content, share. Keep the Q&As going. Absolutely love it. Like the traction that's getting now, the visibility that's getting is humbling. Like people sharing it and go, look, you need to jump on this every Wednesday and Thursday. You won't regret it. It's crazy. If I can find a way to share that to like my the Facebook page, that'd be so clutch. Even if you could dynamically share that to TikTok as a story, that'd be clutch too. But listen, baby steps, baby steps, baby steps. But on that note, let me say take care, guys. Have a great weekend.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. That's Terry at his finest, and that's Terry's Take, episode 113. I hope everybody has a great weekend. Pop, pop, bang. Thanks for liking and subscribing and leaving a comment. Ha ha! Arsenal dropped 2 points. That's title over after we beat Fulham tomorrow. Peace out.